Yeah,
Yeah.
I had this whole plan in my head of like the program we were going to use and audio interfaces, and I bought something, and then I went to go test it with Squadcast, and like nothing was working. The video wasn't
None of
there,
it worked.
I'm
and
so sorry.
and
That's
so we
frustrating.
had yesterday we had worship practice at our church, and our drummer knows like everything about sound stuff, and I was like, come over tomorrow and help me figure this out. I think it's going to take
Yeah.
a couple hours, so I'll buy you dinner. He came
Nice.
20 minutes later. Everything was working on Riverside. And I was like, screw it. I'll pay the extra money, and Riverside it is.
Yeah.
So, welcome everybody to, I don't want to say another episode of the My Life, Your Life Together podcast, because this is our first remote episode.
Yeah.
Which is wild to say. I'm super excited for it. Phoebe Camaletti?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good job.
Good job. I was
Listen,
going to say.
working in healthcare, I see some strange names, and I'm right like 1/10 of the time. So it's not great. But
Yeah.
yes, it is another episode of the My Life, Your Life Together podcast. We're on video. We have a guest from across the country, which is mind boggling to me. But yeah, I I put out a post on Facebook, and I expected like 5 people to message me, and I think I got like 50 comments. I got about 35 DMs.
We got an overwhelming
And
response.
yeah, it was overwhelming, and you just stood out to me. And then
Thank
the
you.
more we talked, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a fun conversation." Like everything about you screams creative, which is why I never come up with titles of episodes beforehand. But this one is Life of a Creative. So I think we're gonna have fun together.
Yeah.
If you want to share a little bit about yourself, about your background, where actually are you? Because I just keep saying across the country.
No, absolutely. And just thank you so much for seeing that in me and wanting to have me on. I think that you both are fantastic, and this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm very appreciative.
Well,
So
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, of course, of course. I'm in Southern California, Phoebe
Okay.
Camaletti, and you killed the name pronunciation, by the way, because the way I like to explain it to people, because I struggle, a lot of people struggle. I will say it's like a camel whose name is Eddie. So it's like Camel Eddie.
Camaletti.
That's
Yeah,
That's a
so
good.
great way
yeah,
to put that.
yeah.
I
Thank
like
you.
that.
And I'm
Easy
I'm
way
a
to remember.
yeah, I'm a speaker. I'm a coach. I'm an artist, and I'm a writer. So that's like a very basic way of looking at what I do.
Okay.
Nice.
What I mean, we're going to cover a lot of it, but what kind of writer? Like short story, book, music?
I appreciate this question because really I'm interested in all writing modalities, but I've honed in my focus. I've made myself kind of like come in on a few, and I focus on novels and poetry in particular.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then along that lines, also you said you were a coach. What kind of coach? Is that a life coach, or is that involved in sports, or what kind of coaching do you do?
So I do writing coaching at present, but what I'm
Okay.
doing, yeah, it's I've been doing it for 11 years. It's been deeply fulfilling for me, both in a creative sense and just a personal development sense as well. Um, but I'm expanding that coaching outward to just be more encompassing of different artistic practices. So in other words, it's going to kind of take what I built with my writing foundation in coaching, and it's going to elevate it beyond that to include visual art, and basically my vision is to make it into a way to help people grow and heal. Because what I've
Wow.
done, yeah, thank you. What I've done with writing coaching up until this point has been very much like someone comes to me with a writing goal, right? So, like, I want to get into this graduate school, or I want to improve my professional writing in this way. But of course, that makes sense. But what I care about more than that is the personal development that happens when you're pursuing what you think is your goal, right?
Mm.
What you really want is confidence. What you really want is communication. What you really want is to feel like you're able to express yourself in a way that's authentic, but in a way that actually reaches people, right? So that's what I
Yeah.
care about. And what I'm looking to do is just kind of build that out by encompassing different creative modalities as part of that, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Oh, is that all?
yeah. So in a way, it's a writing coaching that also turns into a form of life coaching. That
Exactly.
that's
Yes.
really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
I feel like you had something else.
I just,
You have
I
everything.
mean, I always have questions.
I always like to bring up.
I love
So
that.
like you brought up poetry, and it always brings up like one of my favorite stories to tell people is I actually took a poetry class when I was at community college, and I knew nothing about poetry, but I was like, yeah, let's just do it. And the final project, we had to write 12 original poems, 12 different poetic types. I, honest to God, can't remember all the different types that I did. I remember writing a limerick, a haiku, and a
Mm,
sonnet.
mm.
The sonnet, I was 16 years old and I had no idea what like love structure was supposed to be. So I was playing a video game pretty hardcore at the time, and I paid somebody my in-game currency to write my sonnet for me. And my teacher was like, "This is the best poem
Oh
that
my
you've
goodness.
submitted all semester." And I was like, "Thank you so much."
Nice. What
so
was the
so
video game?
Guild Wars.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes.
I'm a gamer too, so maybe we can like get into that a little bit. But yeah, that's
that's
great.
Oh, that'd
awesome.
be awesome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the only one that actually stuck with me is haikus. To this day, I still write haikus on sticky notes and leave them around the office on people's desks because it's easy. Anybody can write one.
Yeah. And that brings up for me something that I do too, especially the past year, Zach. If I go to like a party and it's like a group of friends who I'm really close with, especially, I will do exactly that same thing. I'm like, let's make each other haikus. Like for Valentine's Day, I was literally like, here's the post-its, like
Yes,
you get three, let's make haikus for each other. So
that's
it's
That's
awesome.
pretty cool.
yeah, and like you're saying, it's like easy, right? It's accessible. So that's like a great poetry form to start with for people, I feel like.
Definitely. I'm gonna check on one thing because my phone made a message.
Sure.
All right, I'll pause.
Do you play games as well, Zach?
I do. I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a gamer because I'm not like all that good at them, but I do play games like I grew up playing, Halo and all that, and then right now I love playing RPGs. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I played, like the Star Wars, the Knights of the Old Republic. I've played like the Red Dead Redemption games,
Yes, 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 yes.
Skyrim. I love Skyrim.
Skyrim, yes.
So those are the ones that I love. Right now I'm playing through Hogwarts Legacy.
Oh,
So
nice, nice.
yeah, those are the ones that I'm kind of going through and find that I spend way too much time on.
Skyrim is probably my favorite of the ones that you said, but I really love Red Dead. That's a good series for sure.
Yeah.
I love that series. The last week we were hanging out, and Zach informed me how long ago Skyrim came out,
Hmm.
and we were with somebody who was 16, so she was 3 years old when Skyrim came out, and I was like, no, no,
No,
That's not
no,
possible
an existential crisis.
because
yeah.
I was in college when Skyrim was released.
All right, I have another question.
Yeah.
I have I don't like to call it a toxic trait, but like when I'm at work and we hire people, I just like to Google them to see if anything comes up. So I do that with everybody. Do you
Mhm.
play the violin?
I do play the violin.
Oh, it was you, man. The violin is such a cool instrument.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So I'm a
Yeah,
bassist. So anything with four strings, count me in.
great. No,
How long?
go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, how long have you played the violin, or like what made you get into it?
Violin, man. What made me get into it was my mom would play the Bach double violin concertos. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Most people aren't. But it's just this gorgeous orchestration. And she would just play them. And I remember distinctly the first time that I heard them, and I was like, man, I gotta pick up a violin. And so I did, and I never looked back. That was in fourth grade.
Oh
So
wow.
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, it's been a long time, like 25 years of playing violin. But to your point, I will say I had one year. where I found a group on Craigslist that was looking for a bassist for a zombie punk rock band, and I felt the call, so I got into that and I played bass for a year. But I'm not good at it by any
A
stretch. So
zombie punk rock band?
That's awesome.
Do you have music out there that I can find out what
there
zombie
there
punk
is
rock is?
music. There is music. It's called Zombie Nurse. I'm not sure how deep in the internet you may need to go, but you are welcome to search.
To go find it.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to say. I mean, I was a miscreant teenager, so like in eighth, ninth grade, I was heavily like into 4chan, looking at things. I have not visited that site since I'm a grown adult. So if I have to go that far, I won't ever listen to it. I'm
No
sorry.
4chan, but do what you're comfortable with. No 4chan.
So I was never part of a zombie punk rock band, but I played drums, guitar, and vocals. And the first band I was in, like kid garage band, like never went anywhere. But it was a our attempt at like a metal, like hardcore rock band back in like the early 2000s, named Gunfight in the Graveyard, which
Wow.
we got that name from a match that we played in Gears of War.
Ah, perfect.
'Cause we were playing Gears of War, and there was a level that's like a graveyard, and one of the guys was like, "Oh, this is so cool! It's like a gunfight in a graveyard," and we were like, "That is such a cool name. That's a great
Yeah,
name
there you
for a
go.
metal band."
There you go.
It's
I
a
like
great name
that a
for a
lot.
metal band.
And then it never went anywhere. So
So
That's okay.
was your mom a musician or like a creative? Like, is that what kind of like made you want to get into this style of? I want to call it life because creating is kind of a lifestyle.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point. Creation um, is a lifestyle, like you said. So yeah, my mom was a creative and she is a creative still. She definitely focused on visual art. She never played violin or anything like that. No instruments for her. Whereas that was like a big path that I went down. But yeah, so my family, as a whole, I guess, didn't really focus on creativity that much. And I will say that it wasn't really until I was in high school that I really started embracing creativity as like, yeah, I want to do it all. I want to write poetry. I want to play violin. I want to mess around with paints. I want to do all this stuff. So even though I did creative things when I was a kid, it wasn't so much like I identified with creativity. But I think that's also very natural. When you're a kid, you don't think like that. You just do,
Yeah.
right.
obviously. But point being, like when I was in high school, that's when I actually really started to solidify this sense that, you know what, I'm not just creative, but I can be creative in any freaking way that I want. I can be here, I can be here, I can be here. And that's one of the things that's so important to me in moving in this direction. It's to be able to convey to people, and I truly believe this, that you can embrace creativity however you want. And any boxes or labels that we put on that, ourselves individually and as a society, as a collective, they don't have to be there. Like, use a label if it serves you. Use a label if it serves you, but if it doesn't serve you, don't use it. Like, be creative in any ways that you want. Embrace whatever you're called toward. Um, and it doesn't matter necessarily what it looks like. It just matters that it feels like the right thing for you to do.
that's awesome. And I actually really love that you said that, because it made me think of something that I've said several times. It,
Mm-hmm.
like, throughout my life, being like, "Oh, well, I'm not that creative, but music is my creative expression."
Right.
But because I'll say things like, "Oh, well, I can't draw or I can't do this," but the way you put that, I think that's interesting. Going, well, maybe just not in the expression that someone looks at it, going, "Well, you can't draw because you don't look like this or that." But maybe, I don't know. I'm still mulling over kind of what you said, but I like that. I feel like it opens it up a little bit to, just because maybe your style of drawing or painting or whatever might not be what someone would teach in an art school, doesn't mean that it's not your form of creativity.
Right, right. And if I can comment on that, one thing I noticed but I didn't say in the moment, is because I wanted to see where it went, is when we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about gaming, you said, I'm not a gamer because I don't think I'm good at games. You said, like, I don't identify as a gamer because I don't think I'm good at games. And there's nothing wrong with that way of thinking. Like, I've thought that way about being an artist. It took me a long time to really embrace myself as an artist. But I think that one of the problems that prevents people from feeling creative is, in fact, this idea of being good at something, right? We
Definitely.
all struggle with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
all of us. And that's okay. It's truly natural. Like I said, I've been there for a really long time, a really long time. And in some ways, I'm still there. But the truth is that there is literally no one in the world who is creative exactly the way that you are. And it's when we
That's
get
true.
caught up, yeah, when we get caught up in those comparisons, again, natural, totally normal. But when we're looking outward instead of inward at ourselves, that's when we start to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Someone's already done that. So why would
Yeah.
I do my own approach on that? But I think that it's all stuff that doesn't need to be there if you want to embrace a creative path for yourself. If you want to do that, if that's what feels in your soul, like what you should do, there's nothing that can stop you, and you will do it in a way that's unique to you.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I know I've said it a few times on the podcast, at least, and a lot more to my friends around me. Is um, is I wanted to start a podcast for a couple years, and I would just convince myself it wasn't gonna be any good, that it was gonna be a failure because people didn't listen to it or whatever.
Right.
But the more control I got on my anxiety, because I've had really bad anxiety issues for quite a long time, the tighter control I got on that, the more I needed like a creative outlet for what my brain was actually doing. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to start a podcast. And if people listen to it, great, because it's what I want to do. And if they don't listen to it, then who really cares? I mean, failing to create something is not even trying. If it, I mean, if you were to draw and fail, you could just call it abstract, couldn't you?
That's true.
I can't really have an abstract podcast, though.
Sure you could.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So,
Just be total like philosophical weirdness all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
so
That's me.
I'm really curious. So it was in high school that you started branching out into, you said like music, painting, writing. How long did it take you? Because what you just said, I feel like was kind of profound for a lot of people that are interested in, any sort of form of art or creativity. How long did it take you to get to that point? Was that something that you learned over years of experimenting with different art forms, or was that something that you kind of, I don't know how to put it, maybe had like an innate understanding when you were young and in high school and starting to branch out?
It's a good question. Thank you. I would say my reaction to that is someone who deeply inspired me when I was a teenager is Viggo Mortensen. So he's the guy who was Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. I'm
Yep.
sure you guys know. But the reason that
Never heard of
Viggo,
it.
never, uh, the reason he's so cool, and a lot of people don't know this about him, but he's also a poet and an artist, and he produces his work, like he publishes his work. He has a publishing press, for crying out loud. Like he actually created this publishing company,
That's
to
awesome.
yeah, to support creatives who might not have avenues to publication. That's literally the premise of his company. But my point is, I really admired him. I love when I was a teenager, I loved Lord of the Rings, right? So I was like
Yeah.
drawn in. But when I actually researched this guy and I saw the sheer depth and the breadth of what he was doing creatively, that was a light bulb moment for me where I was like, this guy is extremely successful as an actor, like box office actor, right? In demand, really good. But he's still doing all of this other creative stuff and he's putting it out there. He is producing it. He's not holding back. He's like, and he's also a musician. I could say more about him, right? It just doesn't
Yeah.
stop. And I was like, you know what? I feel, I've always felt called in all of these ways too. So what's really holding me back? Like is it thinking that I can only be a certain way and that's how I'm going to be good? Is it feeling
Mm,
like that's what I have to present to the world because I need them to understand me? And of
yeah.
course, that's always been a struggle. But the reality is, you can create any creative identity that you want. At the end of the day, I don't necessarily care if people are confused that I'm a dancer and I'm a musician and I'm a visual artist and I'm a writer. Like of course I care to
Yeah.
new event, but it's much more important to me to be able to embrace that totality. And that's why I'm moving forward what I'm doing, because I was stifled as like a writing coach. It was just writing. Like, where's this artistic component? Where's this musical component? I need to bring it all in. So yeah, that's the answer to your question. Like it started with Vigo, I think a lot of it, but it did take
Mhm.
time. It was a process starting in high school, I would say, and just deepening and deepening. There was no one way that I did it, but he was kind of like the catalyst that showed me you can be multifaceted. It doesn't mean you have to be good. It just means pursue whatever calls you, basically.
That's cool. I like
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
So you said you were getting into music, you were getting into art and poetry. What was kind of the first thing that you felt like kind of took off out of those things?
It's a good question. I would say writing, but in the sense of the writing coaching specifically. Like I saw very early on that I was very good at helping people with their writing. Meanwhile,
Okay.
a lot of that was because I had writing skill myself, but I kind of like, it's an interesting thing to communicate because there was a repression going on. It was kind of like I care about other people so much and I want to help them succeed so much that I will use my talent to help them. But past a certain point, with a certain level of success and how deep I got into it, it was like I was really just more so actively repressing what I want to say with my own writing,
Mm.
how I want to express myself with my writing. So to come back to your question, writing, I think, would be the first way it took off, but it was not linear because, as I said, it was for other people. That was the primary
Yeah.
focus for a long time.
So then how did that evolve? You said
Mhm.
you were kind of repressing or stifling the things that you wanted to share. How did that evolve back into you being able to get into your own writing as well?
That's a good question too. I think that, as I said, none of it's linear. Nothing is linear. We all
Yeah.
like to believe that this is the path or this is the goal, and therefore I will get there in this way. But a lot of the time, it's just about taking the small steps, and then the rest kind of evolves, right? As we
Hmm.
progress. Um, but okay. I'm sorry. Could you ask your question one more time?
So how did it evolve from you realizing that you were more so helping other people with their writing and kind of repressing or stifling your own, I guess, uh, voice for writing?
Great. Thank you. Okay. So, that was the culmination of a lot of different personal events in my life. There were relationships that I was in that I realized in different ways that I was really just giving so much of myself. And it was to the detriment of myself that I was doing that. I wasn't really fully honoring myself. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was kind of like there was enough progression with that I reached a point where I was like, what I really want to do is I want to be able to finish this big project that I've been working on for like 6 years. I've been writing a novel throughout
Hmm.
kind of that progression of relationships, but it was backburnered because I convinced myself, whatever it is, like this isn't worthy of being completed. Maybe I'm not good
Yeah.
enough, like, right? Or maybe I don't have the time, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's loads of excuses. So when I kind of had the series of realizations and the growth from those relationships, that's when I was able to really look at myself and be like, I want to finish my first novel because I have a million novels inside of me. And
Hmm.
frankly, I think that even people who don't identify as writers have a million novels inside of them. We all have these
Yeah.
stories. We have
Yeah.
these imaginative worlds, right? So anyway, it was the culmination of a lot of personal stuff and relationships that really brought me to the point of like, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna finish it. So I did finish my first novel last year. I'm looking for publication for it
That's
right now.
awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sweet.
Big accomplishment for me. So uh yeah, lots of stuff in my personal life just kind of led me there.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. I like what you said about how like a lot of people have, you know, you know, a writer inside of them because they have these stories. I remember it was like shortly after COVID hit where I'd wake up, I'd go to the hospital and work and be miserable and
Mhm.
then have a 4-day weekend and be like, but you can't do anything. I was like, I have to do something. And I had a dream that was like I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, this would be a fantastic book. And
Mm,
so one day on it, it's like a Saturday, I was like, I'm going to start writing that book. And that's when I discovered that it is so hard to write a book. I
yeah.
started typing with one like idea, and about a page and a half into it, I realized I was nowhere near where I wanted to be. And I was like, no, this isn't my creative outlet right now. I need to find something different.
Mhm, mhm. No, I
You
hear that.
know,
I hear that.
I recently did just meet a writing coach.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh
Where?
yeah. Nice.
Tell me more.
But no, I hear you on that, Zach. I think that's exactly, part of the course for what I was saying. And what that brings up for me is this idea of like, so you start to write, right? And you find out it's harder than you expect, or it's just not calling to you in that moment, or whatever it is, right? All of the different ways that we can express that story and ways that we can do it that we wouldn't label as creative. So to come back to video games, for example, I don't think there's anyone who's like, oh, I'm messing around on Counter-Strike, I'm being creative. But
That's true.
but you I'm not saying it's authentic or not authentic to do this, but you can reframe it because you are using critical thinking, you are problem solving pretty much every minute when you're playing that game. It's
Yeah.
strategy,
Yeah.
right? So what if I'm actually playing a video game that allows me to construct a world? So one of my favorite games that fits that description, oh man, um it's a space oriented game. You can build okay, I'm not gonna be able to remember the game, but any kind of like world building game, right? What if you were able to enact your like hospital idea, whatever it is, in a video game? What if you were able to like construct a world? What if you were able to use a modality that you're comfortable with to get that story across to people? That is very creative.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
I
So
got
it's
thinking to do
whatever
now.
calls to
I got thinking to do now.
you.
So you're going to make the next big. I actually love that idea. Sorry, I was going to make a joke about you making the next big, like, video game, but that really is true because it got me thinking about how many video games out there do you watch, like, the cutscenes for and be like, man, this is better than a movie, you
Mhm,
know? And you
mhm,
look at the creativity. I mean, how many video games are there that out there that the story's phenomenal and then they try to turn it into a
Mm.
movie or a TV series and it just falls flat because they don't do it in the way that it was done in, like you said, the modality of the video game
mhm.
is the perfect setting for it and works so well and it becomes this awesome thing.
Yeah. And just I think, man, like ways to reach, I think, younger people that are creative, like games are an excellent one. And what comes up
Yeah.
for me when you say that is like one, people watching streamers on Twitch or whatever platform, right? They are content creators. They are doing a performance for you. They are showing up for you. They are playing a game while they're
Yeah.
actively engaging with their community.
Yeah.
It is a highly creative thing. And then I also thought of like, speed racing, right? Like people who like create videos of like their
Mm-hmm.
way of getting through the game as fast as possible. Most people would never be like, oh, that's like a really creative thing. Like you're an artist for doing that. They just be like, oh, he's a gamer. Like, cool. But
Yeah,
Right.
it's very creative. It's a very creative thing. So all of this is creative. It just depends on how you look at it.
That's really cool.
that is really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Give me a whole new perspective on things.
Oh,
I like
good.
that.
I would
Good.
never. I was never good at speedrunning games. I would always get sidetracked. Like I'm ADD in real life, and I remember there was like one mission I tried to speedrun in
Uh-huh.
Guild Wars actually, and like it was so easy, literally an idiot could do it. It's like one of the first 3 missions in the game, and I would still get sidetracked for no reason.
Other than you just were like, ooh, shiny thing.
Yeah, I like to explore.
But that also, I think, comes to that what you were saying about creativity. That's one of the reasons why I love these RPGs like Skyrim or Red Dead or all these things is because there's not just one, it's not a scripted storyline. It is a scripted storyline, but it's not this, you know, you have to go through this one door this one time. Like there's so much different things, so many different things that you can do in the game. And like for instance, my wife, I've been playing the Hogwarts Legacy game and she's been watching me play and I was like, "Babe, you should you should play it. And she's like, oh, well, I've been watching you. Like, and I
Mhm.
was like, no, there's so much to do in this game. Like, you try it, you play it, and let's see what happens. And so she's playing it, and she's playing it a completely different way than me. She's found stuff like I'm levels ahead of her, but she's already found stuff in the game that I've never seen before. And I'm like, where did you find that? You know, and I was like, see, this is why,
That
like,
tracks for her.
yeah. And, I think that's one of the reasons why I like those games. And I think that just goes to kind of prove your point that there's all sorts of different ways to go about using your creativity.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I completely hear that and I agree. And I love that she's having a different experience than you are. Um, but other Zach, your point about, moving off the path and getting kind of distracted, right? Um, I know that that can be frustrating because you're trying to get to the goal, right? But that honestly, that's a very creative thing to do, even though it feels maybe not that way in the moment. It's like you just said, I like exploring. And that's exactly what you're doing. It is very creative to allow yourself to explore and then to explore it all because the whole reason people like video games is because they're so immersive. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
for some people it's a book. That's how they get immersed. For some people it's art. That's how they get immersed, right? So it doesn't matter whatever draws you in and allows you to feel comfortable exploring, experimenting, messing around. That is a way to be creative. And if you label it as creative, it helps you deepen into it, is my belief. Once you start to actually associate what you're doing with creativity, the creativity expands for you.
That makes sense. And I like it.
So I have another question.
No.
Back to the writing stuff.
Yes.
Can we get a sneak preview at what your novel's about?
Yes, you can. It is about a young woman who is essentially having an existential crisis of sorts. She's about to graduate from college, really not sure of her place in the world. She's highly intelligent. She's neurodivergent. She has this
Okay.
acuity. She has this acuity of thought. She's constantly noticing everything, like every sensation. She's very, very privy to. But then she starts having these really dark dreams, and there's this figure that starts showing up in her dreams over
Hmm.
and over and over again. The figure gets more and more sinister, and then she starts actually seeing things in real life as well. All of this to say that she is haunted by the soul of Beethoven, and he's never named
Huh.
explicitly in the novel.
Yeah.
It's like it's very suspenseful. There's a lot of mystery elements where the reader can piece together the fact that it's Beethoven,
Yeah.
but it's never acknowledged. And
Yeah.
so it's essentially Beethoven like trying to transcend time to be with her, basically, because he sees her level of insight and her sincerity and depth of emotion, and he wants to be with that. So it's kind of
Huh.
trippy, it's edgy, but
Yeah.
that's what it's
Like a suspenseful kind of thriller.
doing.
I
Hmm.
That's
want to
really
read it right
interesting.
now.
Thank you.
So you said you're in the process of getting it published?
I am in the process of finding an agent to get it published. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man. So how difficult I'm just curious, how difficult is that whole process?
I appreciate this question um, because it is a difficult process. So I very much believe in the quality of my work and I believe
Mm,
that it's going to happen and I believe that the timing is going to align however it needs to. So I'm not concerned that it hasn't happened yet, right? That I haven't found the person because I know the person is out there. But to come back to your question, it's difficult. It's a lot of research to identify agents that you feel like
mm,
you would want to work with. Then it's more research to put together your materials in the sense of exactly what they want because every agent is
mm.
different. And then
Yeah.
it's a lot of work on top of that to tailor the package for each individual person, send it out, deal with correspondence. So it's a lot of work. It's kind of like a part time job to be querying agents
Wow.
Wow.
Just to find an agent.
just to find an agent.
And then I'm sure that's a whole other process once you have an agent to finding basically doing the same thing all over again but for a publishing company, I'm guessing.
Correct. That is spot on. Yes.
Man, that's
So it's a
awesome.
thing. Yeah, it's a thing. And there's always people, myself included, always have the option to self publish. And I'm definitely interested in doing that for my other work down the road because I, as a creative, I want to expand and reach people in as many ways as I can. And
Mhm.
this is just kind of the path that I'm on right now to try to do traditional publishing for this specific book. But I say this to say, as encouragement to people, truly, if there is something that you've written and you feel like the instinct is to put it out into the world for any reason, maybe it's for you, maybe it's for other people, there are ways that you can do it. It doesn't have to look traditional, it doesn't have to look a certain way. Like, I promise you that there is a way to get your work out into the world. It just takes a little bit of perseverance and some legwork to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think 2 episodes ago was Seeing Through the Darkness. Like one of our friends,
I
she
saw
came
that.
on and talked
Mhm.
about her book, and I don't. She doesn't self publish. She works with a publisher, um, and has. I mean, it worked fantastically for her first book.
Mhm.
Um, and then I used to work with somebody. One of the doctors I used to work with, he actually had self published a trilogy of just this fictional kind of suspense. Not apocalyptic. I can't think of the word right
Like
now, but
post-apocalyptic or
no,
dystopic?
yeah, that's the word. And I along those lines, and I mean they both work fantastically for each of them. But who's to say, if they swapped places and he used a publisher and the other one didn't and self-published? I mean, it
Mhm.
goes back to what you've kind of been saying a lot through here. Is you got to do what works for you,
Right.
and I think you're handling it better than I would. I'm very much like, if I get something like focused in my mind, I'm like, I need to get there. How can I get there?
Right.
And you're like, it's gonna happen in its own time.
Right.
And that's an awesome mindset. I've been actively trying to have that mindset more and more with things in life.
Well, what I'm hearing from you also, and thank you for saying that, but what I'm hearing also is you seem very committed. You seem very dedicated and very driven. And that in and of itself is like a beautiful thing, truly, to have that kind of like resolve, to reach where you're going. So I hear that and I celebrate that. I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So writing is one of your creative outlets, and then you said visual arts. Is that also like painting, drawing? What all does that encompass?
So what I was thinking about saying about that at some point in this, because Zach, I know that you like Star Wars. I saw in your bio. Um, I am doing something really cool, and I think this is a good way of talking about different branches of creativity. I
Mhm.
am creating an art mural for my lightsaber fencing academy. And so it's me bringing together my fencing and my art. And I think that both are creative. So I want to talk about that in a minute, but I just wanted to say that straight up. So that's my main project right now, a mural for a lightsaber academy.
That is awesome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to hear about both of those things
I
because
can feel his excitement radiating off of him right now.
Good.
like that is awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so tell me about the mural. Like what that's painted mural. Okay. So
Yeah.
tell me about that.
Okay, so it's all I was asked was to do something that had kind of a nod in the direction of space.
Mm,
Because it's a Star Wars Academy, right? So
yeah.
I was like, okay, no problem. But I'm very abstract and I'm very colorful with my visual art. So I've
Yeah.
been taking it in this kind of psychedelic space direction. It's kind of like there's some nebula-esque action that's going on, but there's like a lot of kind of clouds as part of that, but they're like rainbow clouds. But then there's like this overlay of stars in a sense on
Yeah.
top. And so it's very, let's say, distinctive. Like when you walk through the door of the academy, it's like, whoa, like what's on the wall? But it's really cool, especially because I okay, so the way that the academy is set up is that, there's different areas, of course, for everybody to defense, but the I don't know what we call it in lightsaber, but basically just like your fighting area has LED
Mhm.
lights, around.
Yeah.
So different colors. There's like a pink section, there's a blue section, there's a purple section.
That's
And the
awesome.
lights kind of glow bright and they illuminate the mural in a certain way. It's just so exciting and it's so cool.
That is so cool.
That is really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been super, super fun. Um, and I'll tend to work on it at times when there's practice going on. So I'll just like go in and everybody's like fighting around me, and I'll move the ladder to try to like, get out of the way so no one runs into me. But it's just been a real adventure and a real honor, because the lightsaber community that I'm part of, it means a whole lot to me, and I've really
Yeah.
developed my fighting through this league, through this group. And so to be asked to contribute a mural for this new space that we have is just like, it's such a privilege, and it's a really beautiful thing for me.
That's so
That's
cool.
awesome. I know you can ask another question.
Oh,
I have to
yeah.
get this off my
Go
head
for it.
first. I don't think I've ever had somebody slip something into conversation as casually as you did when you just brought up lightsaber fencing, and just you slipped it in as if it was a daily exercise. One, you're not just taking fencing, you're just like lightsaber fencing, which I'm absolutely like floored by. I want to come look at this academy right
Yeah.
now. But that just made me laugh on the inside, and I had to share that. All
No,
right,
thank you.
go
Thank you.
ahead.
So, couple couple questions, because I think it's so cool, the idea of you're working on the mural as people are actively fencing around you. Has that in any way inspired you or affected any part of your mural as you're watching people around you fencing while you're painting?
I think that there has been a subconscious effect. I appreciate this because I actually thought about that as well. Um, one way that I can describe the mural with words is that kind of there's a certain movement happening
Hmm.
in one half, and it's reversed in the other half. So it's kind of, in other words,
Okay.
like two people coming together and fencing, right? It's like the both
Yeah.
sides. So I would say that that's part of it, but probably also just the movement that I'm trying to achieve with the stars, because the stars are kind
Yeah.
of spreading out. I think that that's at least related to everyone moving around me. I don't know how much, but it's all, part of the course. It's all together. So
That's super cool.
thank you.
So, how did you get into lightsaber fencing?
There's a
And where can I sign up?
So first of all, I want to encourage you, because it's important to me that you would try that, you yourself, if you felt
Mhm.
called to do it. But also, this is a good point about creativity, where it's like, I will tell you that so many people, like when I was in my last band playing violin, this was also a punk rock band. The number one thing that people would say to me is they would come up to me and they would say, like, I've always wanted to play violin.
Yeah.
And I would always be a little bit confused by that question. I would always encourage them, but really kind of where I'm at with thinking about that is, it's like, you can start anytime. We just tell
Right.
ourselves that we can't. And similar to you, when people hear about my fencing, they're like, that's so cool. Like, how do you do that? And they don't mean it like, how do I start? They mean it like, how do you find time? How do you like do that with your life? And I'm like,
Yeah.
you just do it. You just do it.
Yeah.
So I hope that you try it. But how I got into it is that I was fencing in college. I was a traditional fencer, so I was a
Oh
foilist.
wow. Yeah.
Mhm. And then when I moved out to Southern California, I was looking for a way to continue my fencing. I happened to find that there was like a lightsaber rendition of it. So
Yeah.
I just showed up to practice. Like, I didn't do anything else, guys. Like, there was no other like
You just showed up.
I
That's
just showed
awesome.
up, and now here I am creating a mural for this space, and it's a beautiful community. And I will say that if you feel called to something, just take a step. Take a step in that direction. You will find your people. You will find what feels good. Like, allow yourself to do the thing that you think that you can do, and it will be so fulfilling for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, nerd part of me going off on the different tangents. Like, do you guys? Because I know I've seen, right, and I've looked at and researched the different like lightsaber things that they have, and some are like combat ready or whatever. Do you guys use those, or do you have like special sabers that are actually like designed for? I don't know. I'm curious as to what do you guys use to fence with?
Sure, sure. And you bring up a good point, actually, for anyone who's interested in this, which is that there are different like kinds of approaching lightsaber combat, right? So I'm part of a community called Light Speed. And that is a certain subset of like actual fencing that uses lightsabers. So there's other groups that do more of like the combat style, like you're saying. There's other groups that I think approach fencing differently. They have different rules, they have different regulations. For my
Mm-hmm.
community, a lot of people make their own weapons. That's kind of like the main way that you do it, but they're very
Yeah.
sturdy. You know, they're legitimate weapons. But it's not like you could hurt someone. There's no sharp
Yeah.
part of it, obviously, right?
Right.
So, but it's very much like a lightsaber, but just functional in terms of fighting with it. So yeah.
That's cool.
See, I could get behind that. We have a friend who's like into LARPing, and like
Mm-hmm.
she's made her own armor, weapons, and stuff. And she was telling me like a month ago, she like drove down to New Jersey from New York. I think it was New Jersey from New York. I don't know, some other state, or it could just be downstate. Who cares?
Yeah.
Um, and she's like, yeah, and so it was like a storm the hill kind of thing, and she was like, I wanted to be on the team that was running up the hill. And then she took out the armor she built, and it was like she handmade it all out of metal. I don't know if I could have walked up the hill in this stuff, like honestly. And she's like, you should try it sometime. And I was like, no.
No,
Like
no.
maybe when I was younger, like yes, I don't have that motivation, but this, you tell me I don't have to put any gear on, and I just get to make a lightsaber. Well, not 70-pound armor. At least I don't have to wear.
Right, right. It's basically like regulation is that you need elbow pads and you need some shin guards and gloves that cover your wrist. But that's
Mm-hmm.
about, I mean, and a mask, obviously. But that's it.
Yeah.
And it's nothing heavy. So yeah, very approachable in that way. I would definitely say. LARPing is fun. LARPing is fun. You know, when I was
Yeah.
in that zombie band that I played bass for, we played at a LARPing convention. Like we did a show at a
That's
LARPing
awesome.
convention. So I know LARPing, it's great. For me, I'm more so interested in actual like athleticism with
Yeah.
my fencing, with my fighting. So that brings me to kind of the creative point I wanted to make with that, which is that, you know, to be able to think of sports as creative, most people would like
Yeah.
be like, no, like it's a sport, like because they're boxing it in, and that's understandable. I get why, but the decisions that you have to make, what you have to do with your body, and what
Mm-hmm.
kind of problem solving you have to do to be good at a sport is extremely creative. Not to mention
Yeah.
that in fencing, for example, everyone has his or her own style. Like you can see someone across a room, you don't know what they're wearing or whatever. You're like, oh, that's Alice or whatever, right? Like you can just tell because of their style. So it's
By the
all
way they move and handle their weapon and all that. That's cool.
exactly. No, exactly. And so it's creative. I think it's creative and I love that, like many things for me, that's a synergy of my visual art and then my like athletic art, you know, so to speak. So that's the
Yeah.
spot for me. And anyone can do that. Anyone can kind of bring these different like weird things together. It's just a matter of believing that you can. And I know that might sound cheesy, but it's really the truth. You have to start with the belief that you can just be weird and bring different stuff together.
And just embrace it and enjoy it too.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with your painting, you
Mhm.
said you started that out in high school, and then you've gotten to a point like now where you're painting the mural for your fencing academy. Have you done anything else with your painting as far as professionally? What does that look like?
Yeah. I've done several different exhibits the past several months. So I've been in a few different shows. So that's mostly just work that I've created over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly paintings, but a lot of what I do is also very multimedia. So I like using different weird materials. I like doing sculptural stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So the answer is yes. But it's been mostly in the painting sense. As I
Yeah,
continue to evolve, I hope to do more in the way of the multimedia and the sculptural and to get that out into the world more and more. But it's all on track. You know, it's all just happening. So yeah.
that's awesome.
Thank you.
That's really cool. Yeah, I remember when I was like probably a teenager, even early 20s.
Mhm.
I, for the life of me, could not understand like framed art. Like, why are people obsessed with this? Even sculptures and stuff. Like, why are people obsessed with this? And then, not that I'm older, or anything. I'm 31, but like the older I got, I realized it wasn't about like the art. It was, for me, it was like processing it, like, and I'm gonna sound like a crazy person right now, but there's a Metallica documentary called Some Kind of Monster, and in it, the drummer Lars, um, he's talking about like a song being done, and he points to this huge painting he has in his house. It's like, why did they decide to put a blue stripe there and not two blue stripes there?
Mhm.
And like ever since then, I was like, that's a good point. And every time I look at something, I'm like, all right, so why do they do 4 streaks of white instead of 3 streaks of white or something like that? And just they must have felt something in the moment that told them to do that. And that, I feel like the older I get, the more fascinating art is to me.
Good. Yeah.
You learn to actually look into it other than just, oh, that's colors on a piece of canvas.
But the episode of It's Always Sunny where Danny DeVito just makes fun of art is still one of the funniest episodes I've ever seen.
Oh, I've not seen that. Tell me like a little synopsis. What
I was going
happens?
to say, I haven't seen that one either.
Um, I forget what the premise of the episode is, but he walks into this art gallery to show like people that art is art is basically subject to whatever the person says it is, and so he puts on a wig and like just makes himself look like a crazy person. Big
Mhm.
frame glasses, and he walks in there and he's pointing at everything. He's just like, garbage, garbage, garbage. And then he points to a trash can and he's like, that,
uh,
that's beautiful. And the curator's like, that's just a trash can. And he's like, I must have it. And he spits out a number, and then somebody else overhears him, and they're like, "Oh, that's nice. I'll give you this for it." And the whole episode is just hilarious.
I like that. I like that a lot. I might have to actually seek that out and watch that because that sounds great. That brings up a lot of different things for me, and one that I think would be most valuable for us to talk about might be this idea of like, why did we as a society decide that just because something like means what you say it means, just because you made some subjective choice that other people don't understand, why is that less valuable than like hard data? Why is that
Hmm.
necessarily less valuable than these things that are very logical and straightforward? Why can't they both be of equal value? Because, and the reason I say that is because I think that a lot of people attach a stigma to the idea of like, oh, here's this poem. Well, it just means whatever you think it means, so it doesn't matter. Like they think that just because it's so interpretable means that it's less worthy or like it's less meaningful or something like that. But what if that's actually the quality about it that makes it really cool? Dude decides to make two blue stripes instead of one. Okay, interpret that, have fun creatively unpacking what you think that means. The guy
Yeah.
will tell you what he thinks it means. We are all in this creative process all the time. And that is what is exciting about life. It's the fact that we can have different opinions and we can come together and we can connect and we can learn. People just stop wanting to learn at some point, I guess, in a lot of different ways. But the more you allow yourself to get uncomfortable and actually process those ideas, I think the more that you can grow. And that's really what it's about, I feel like.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because I mean that was I mean that's how the name of the podcast came to be.
Oh,
Was
wow.
literally like I wanted to meet with people, and I don't care where you come from. Like I can have a conversation with you and we can get along and we can disagree and still learn something from each other.
Mhm.
Like we're both Christian, we go to church. We're going to talk to a lot of people who aren't Christian, and they're not going to agree with what we believe, and we might not agree with what they believe, but we can still get something valuable out of conversation with each other and learn something about each other's lives.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that is interesting. And I think it comes back to, well, partly I think some of it may just be personality types because there are, like people that have difficulty kind of understanding things that are abstract, and they
Mhm.
want those like the hard data. And I wonder if that's part of why some of that has become, you know, more difficult for people to really like you said, embrace that kind of creative process of interpreting it and becoming a part of the creative process, which I thought was super interesting because I've never heard that before with, interpreting, whether it be music, a painting, or poetry, or whatever form, as the person that is viewing it or experiencing it, that you have a hand in the creative process. I actually think that's pretty cool. I actually haven't heard that perspective before.
Right, right. No, and I hear you. And I think that your point about how some people, how their minds work just kind of more so naturally, that's completely a valid point. Like you're right. Some people are just more naturally inclined to be logical, and some people are much more inclined to just want the answer. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that
Yeah.
that is what makes those people unique. That's part of their creative expression of self, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, caveat I think is kind of like it's undeniable that society does prioritize the logical thinkers. It does prioritize STEM. Like,
Yeah.
how are we going to get people involved in math and science and engineering? How are we going to drive that forward? Versus how are we, like approaching this in school, for example? Like, people are taught basically to follow and fit the mold, to prioritize the science and math. Sure, there's art education. I know that there is. But what's really the quality of that? And how much is that encouraging people to individualize themselves? Not only that, but to really learn, you know what? I am creative in my own way, and I can take that to mean whatever I want it to mean. Like, that is who I
Yeah.
am. And it's not a competition. It's not a race. It's just like, this is me. This is you. That's beautiful. This is you. That's beautiful. But all of us together just really respecting and honoring how we're different. That's a creative process.
I think uh, the point that you just made, I love, and I feel like something just popped in my head as you were saying that was, as you said, it's prioritized in a way that's like just kind of fit the mold. But I think uh, creativity is also critical thinking,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's one of the things that also we kind of lack in our society nowadays is the ability to critically think and process for yourself instead of just what you're told or what you're told to do. And that just got me on this little rabbit hole, you know, train of thought where I'm like, how does that fit into the logic, a logic based mind? And then it got me thinking in the sciences, like, okay, a researcher, they have to be creative in the way that they do research and problem solve and create things like, we wouldn't have different medical breakthroughs if we didn't have people with logical brains that also were able to embrace their creativity and use it in a way that's going to,
That's good.
have, whether it's scientific breakthroughs or, whatever. I don't know. That's just kind of the train of thought that set me off on. And I thought that was super cool.
You're
No,
smart.
that's extremely important to acknowledge. So I'm so glad that you said that. Like, man, oh man, right? Just how can we reframe these ideas of what's creative and what's not? Because you're completely right. Like in science, there is so much creative thinking, there's so much problem solving as part of that creative thinking. Like you said, innovations all the time, but we put them in these certain boxes of thought, which is ironically the total opposite of creativity, right? We're like, oh,
Yeah.
like you're a lawyer. That is dry. That is logical. You are like reading textbooks and you're like regurgitating stuff, right? Like you're not
Yep.
creative. Or you're a doctor. Like you are this, you are that. But it's all creative. It's all creative. Like every thought process, even the logical processes, and people whose minds are more inclined to be very straightforward, there is creativity in that because it's all just part of this expression of yourself that is creativity. So I think you made a very good point. That's very important.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
like that.
You brought up lawyer, and that just reminded me of our friend Joe, who has been on the podcast before, and somebody I went to high school with, and he's in law school now. but like he was walking us through his history, and I mean he was a server, then he was a restaurant manager. In between, he was a radio DJ. He did modeling for a little bit, and then he was like, "All right, now I'm going to go to law school." Now I'm like, "All right, you can do whatever you want and
do any and all of it."
And it's just simply because I've always loved that about him. Like he saw something or he wanted to do something and he did it. I remember being in high school with him. He was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be a radio DJ," and like we went to a very small private Christian school where something like that, I can't imagine, was nurtured. And yeah, and then he did it, and he did it for a couple years, and I think a couple years, and he was like, "Yeah, it was good." Didn't want to do it forever. Then he stopped, and that's when he got into like restaurant business and what have you. And then I think one day he was like surfing, and somebody, I'm pretty sure he told the story on the podcast, like gave him a business card as he was leaving. He was like, "Hey, there's a modeling show down in Atlantic City. You should come check it out." And so he got in his car from upstate New York, drove down to Atlantic City just to watch it, met with the guy, and then he ended up doing a couple shows because it was just something he always wanted to do. And I was like, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And what that brings up for me is this idea of like when we move from one experience to the next, right? That is us creating the story of our lives, right? So it's like, here's a chapter into this chapter. But the cool thing that I'm thinking of right now is it's not just like you close a chapter and that's over. It's that the story is ever evolving. So he's actually taking the DJing and the modeling into his work as a lawyer, even if it's just subconscious, even if he's not aware of it, it's all incremental and everything that we do is constantly building on itself. And I genuinely believe that that's a very creative thing. It doesn't mean that you're always aware of it, like I said, but this building of our identity is probably the most creative thing that actually we're capable of doing.
That's cool.
Yeah. I like that you keep talking about like this subconscious creativity because I've literally never thought about it in that like perspective before. And it's really fascinating to me. Just be like, oh, something that you don't think is creative, but deep down subconsciously it is creative. Like I love watching food shows, like Food Network shows, and like any competition they always talk about plating. And I'm like, okay, well, who cares about plating? And the first time you see it, and I'm like, no, that's a piece of art, and I don't even want to disturb that. I'm going to because the prettier the plate, the more expensive it is. So that means I'm going to eat it. But yeah, it's even just the the art of cooking is creative in and of itself. Like you talked about researching, it's like we had somebody who's a local chef. Type 1 diabetic like we are, so he reached out and wanted to come on, and he talked about him just like chilling in the kitchen, and he's like, yeah, if I think of something I want to make, just go into the kitchen, I'll see if it works. Sometimes it's awful, sometimes it's not.
Right.
Sometimes it's really good,
right? And I hear you on that, and I think cooking is a great example of like something people might not label as creative, but it so is.
Oh
right?
my gosh, yeah.
It's a beautiful art form. But I'm really interested in what you said about the subconscious creativity bit, because I've been thinking recently about how everyone knows that we dream. Everyone dreams literally every night. Like, but we're also talking about dreams all the time. Like, we're very aware that we dream. But very rarely do people like really understand that that means that your subconscious brain is programmed to tell stories. It's programmed to be creative. It's programmed to create realities. It's programmed to deconstruct and repatternize and look at things differently. And that's just your subconscious, to say nothing of your conscious mind. So if we know that at our core, we dream, and not only that, but it's an essential process, and we don't fully understand why, but we know that we have to dream. What does that say about you as a creative person? Like, your brain is literally creating stories every night. Like, you can do anything. You can do anything.
That's actually super cool.
Yeah.
I'd never really thought of it in that way, but I like that. Put it like you're programmed to be creative.
Yeah.
I've been, I don't know. I like to call it blessed because like
Hmm.
for as long as I can remember, I a lot of the time I can realize I'm dreaming and just kind of like putz around in my dream and do whatever.
Good.
And it's like I remember the first few times I did it, it was like I never finished the movie Inception. I've just never finished it. There was like a half hour left, but someday I'll finish it. But anyway, like I'll see stupid things like a clock that says, a clock that the time is written in dice or something in the car, and I'm like, it's probably a dream right now, isn't it? And I'll do something stupid, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is definitely a dream. And every so often, you can just like, I don't know, like you said, create something out of nothing in your dream, and then there's other dreams where clearly I don't know it's a dream, but then I wake up and I'm like, that was a pretty sick dream. I wish I could do something with that. Wish I could record it and sell it.
No, I
I
love that.
mean, maybe not. You can't like visually record it, but you could express it.
Well, like I
There
said,
we go. There we go.
I,
I'm
I,
catching on.
I had that, I had that dream that I woke up and I wrote in my notes that when I tried to write that book, and I think someday I am gonna like learn to try it. Like I just, even if it's like an 18-page short story or something like that,
Yeah.
I think it would be fun just to see it through because the concept of it is, I just, I don't know,
No, I think
it
it
still makes me
deserves
think.
it deserves it. And I think, yeah, if it continues to be on your mind, I think it will align for you. You'll figure it out the way that you want to convey that. I do believe that can happen for you. And I think it's worth telling the story. Um, and what you guys are saying is so interesting because that brings me back to Inception being a minor influence in me writing the novel that I described because
Hmm.
I am so interested in this intersection of dreams and reality. I'm like so,
Yeah.
so, 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 so interested because we tend to obviously define that like this is waking life, this is sleeping life, right? And that's
Right.
fine. But like, is that really true? Like, what? It's all in your mind. And we all know that we create our reality based on what our mind thinks,
Perceives.
right?
Yeah.
So are they really different? I wonder. And I have fun playing with that in my writing. I think it's just so
Yeah.
richly fascinating.
It's Yeah, I love talking about the brain. I've worked like in neurology fields for the last 10 years. And
Mhm.
so like knowing that like the faces you see in your dreams, like your brain doesn't generate faces. It's somebody you've seen in real life has always fascinated to me. Like, you know, I we were just down in New York City for a show. I probably saw 10,000 different faces there. And at
Mhm.
any given point, I'm going to have a dream with one of those people in them, and I'm not going to have a clue where their face came from.
I like that.
And it's uh, makes my brain hurt if I think about it too much. But I
That's
Right.
love it.
that's fascinating. I had no idea that was
Yeah.
the thing with your brain not generating faces. I never knew
Yeah.
that. That's kind of trippy.
And I like that also because you're saying like my brain will hurt if I think about it too much. But that's the beauty of the subconscious. It's like we can be actively thinking up here, but in reality, what our brain is truly processing is the stuff that you don't have conscious thought about. You're not worried about it. But so much is happening behind the scenes creatively. So that's what I was saying about dreams. It's like we are creating all of the time in some part of our brain or another. So like we are intrinsically creative. There's no
Yeah.
there's no way around it. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask. We talked about your writing. We talked about your painting. What about your music? So you mentioned
Zombie
your
punk
your
band,
zombie punk
man.
band. You also mentioned you were part of another punk rock band.
Uh-huh.
What was I guess your musical creative career?
I appreciate this question. And I appreciate it especially because music is something I'm moving away from a little bit, at least for the time being. And so I
Hmm.
love to be able to reflect on that because it's been a really important part of my creativity. Um, so I started with music in orchestras. So fourth grade
Okay.
onward, yeah, like I was in a bunch of different orchestras, some chamber groups, so like smaller orchestras,
Yeah.
basically, what a chamber group is. Um, and I was very much in the classical world for a long time until I felt the call from that Craigslist ad to be in an actual band playing bass, which I had never played before.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, I was like, I like being in bands. Like I really
Mhm.
like being on stage. I like performing. I like engaging with people in this different way. Because when you're in an orchestra, right, it's a beautiful, beautiful experience where like you feel like you have a family, you have this community of musicians, but you're one
Mhm.
in a crowd, right? Whereas
Right.
if you're like one of five people on stage, like you're doing your thing, like you can vibe however you want, right? Like so it's just a different kind of energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was the zombie band. There was a cover band. I would go with some of my friends and we would go into um senior centers and we would basically play for people there and it was wonderful.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, it was really, really cool. So I did violin for that. I did violin for that. I did bass for the zombie one. And then when I moved out to California, that's when I joined a Celtic punk rock band. And so I did that for a few years. And that was a
That's
trip.
awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It was a trip because we were constantly playing. We were constantly playing. It was gigs every single weekend, LA, San Diego. We were kind of all over the place. But because it was so much, that actually is a cool connection back to what I'm saying about my creativity because
Mhm.
it was kind of confining me in a way. It was taking a lot of my time and it was really
Yeah.
beautiful and good, but it just reached its natural conclusion where I was like,
Mm.
I need to be able to focus elsewhere. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of my creative journey for music in a nutshell.
That's actually super cool. And I feel like in a way, so with my musical background, I was a part of bands in high school and stuff, and then I was a part of a bunch of worship teams. Like we both shared, we're Christians, and I've been in the church, and so I played in a lot of different like worship teams and stuff, and actually got to a pretty high level um, with that with a ministry I was involved in until I eventually um, kind of stepped away, and I actually stepped away for 6 years
Mhm.
while I pursued a career and stuff like that. And um, it's interesting because just recently I've stepped back into playing music at our church now with the music or with the worship team and stuff. And so it's been fun almost having a similar journey where it was very something I was very involved and very invested in, and I stepped away for a while, and I'm actually having a lot of fun stepping back into and almost rediscovering that creative side of myself that I had, I guess, set to the side for a little bit. That was also a lot thanks to him being like, "Hey, when are you gonna
Okay.
audition? When are you gonna audition?" I know that. So
I love that, and I'm happy for you. I think that's amazing. And obviously, like I was saying a little bit, you're kind of bringing, I think, some of those experiences while you were taking a break. You're bringing that into what you're doing now, even if it's
yeah,
not like a conscious thing. So that's really cool.
and I actually feel like the way that I play music has kind of changed. I feel almost like I have a different perspective in the way that I play, and I don't know that it's I don't know that it's a different mind. It might be a different mindset. I think I don't fully know quite how to articulate it just yet.
Mhm.
But stepping back into it, there's almost something a little bit different about playing now than there was when I was playing before.
Mhm.
Um, or maybe it's just different things that I'm learning about my own, musicianship while I'm doing it. But I'm really enjoying getting to play now. Um,
Mhm.
Another thing that I love about it, and I am kind of curious to hear your thoughts and take on this, is during that period I got married, and my wife is a classically trained pianist, and so she plays piano, she plays keys on our worship team. And so it's something that now we get to do together, is playing music together and playing on the worship team and stuff. And I love it. I enjoy it. It's awesome getting to play music, because then also my wife and I will practice at home. We'll play. We've got a drum set. I've got my guitar. We've got a piano at the house, and so we get to play music together at home as well, which is just, I don't know, it's a super cool experience that I haven't had before, having that one emotional and relational connection to a person while also being able to play music and have that creative connection as well, which was super. It's been a really awesome, a really fun experience.
I love that. And I love that your marriage is one in which you both play games and you both do music. I like
Yep.
that you play both, so to speak. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also been fun with friendships too. Like
Mhm.
we do this, together as a form of creativity, doing the podcast, but then outside of that, we both also play music together. And are actually starting to like try to write music together and stuff. So that's been
Yes, that's been fun. Something I've
yeah.
been wanting to do for a while was write music, and finally just kind of jumped into it. I mean, I've like written a bunch of lyrics and stuff in my phone over the years, but I've been like wanting to write music for the church, and finally I just asked a bunch of people. I was like, let's do it. Like, it's like I can't do it
Yeah.
alone. Like, if I do it alone, I'm looking at it one perspective, and I'm gonna think maybe an idea is crappy. But if I spit it out there, and he takes an idea that I thought was crappy and spins it into a fantastic idea, and so I like the team collaboration and like taking all these different creative minds because we all operate so differently. Like, I have no music theory background. I taught myself how to play bass by memorizing Metallica songs,
Good
and
for you.
then that's how I spiraled into it. And then, like he said, his wife's a classically trained pianist.
Yeah.
Her sister, our worship director, is a pianist and played the violin
Yeah, she plays
way back,
violin as well.
way back when, and is starting to want to get into it again. And so you have all these different minds, and like the first session we had, we got like we just got so much accomplished. We found a lot that didn't work, but we found a few things that did work, and that was more than I ever could have imagined. Speaking of which, we have that tomorrow night, and I have to
Yep.
remind people. Sorry.
I love that. And I think what you're saying about connections with other people in a creative process is like so important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important. Man, that's how we're made, to make those connections. And when you can do it within a sincerely creative kind of like framing, like it just expands the connections that you can make. It expands the trust that you can have with people, the way that you can communicate with people. It's somehow,
Yeah.
yeah, when you're doing something creative, at least in my experience, it makes the connections that you have with people stronger. It's like
Hmm.
it's the thing, it's like this magic like sauce that just
Yeah.
somehow happens. And while you were talking about that, an interesting thought came up for me, which is like when we're doing something creative, we are creating community and we're creating the thing itself that we're doing, whether that's music or lyrics or whatever it is. But those things are also creating us at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So every creative act has this double kind of synergistic quality where it's like we
Hmm.
are putting forth, we are creating, but this sheer act of doing that alone is shaping our identity, it's shaping our life path, it's shaping who we are. And I just think that that's a beautiful kind of way of looking at it. Like whatever you put out is being returned creatively in kind to you. It's like both at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I definitely agree with it. Um, and I can see why people are hesitant to create with other people.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, at least with the songwriting, it's super vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
You you can't really, I don't know, you can't be timid. Like, I know not every idea is going to be great, but I'm going to throw it out there because thankfully I don't care a lot about what people think, and I'm doing this experience with some of my best friends, whether I've known them for a year and a half, but it feels like longer, or people that I've known for the last decade of my life. So it's easier for me to be vulnerable and just be like, I really like this. I really like this. And they're like, no. Okay, they don't say it like that, but they're like, one of them, there were a few lines of the verse that I just kept rhyming, and I didn't want them to rhyme, but my brain was stuck in this rhyme spin. And so our friend Ariana, she was like, all right, well, let's just take what you're trying to say and then just reword it.
Hmm.
And within an instant, she had the second line done. She's like, oh, it doesn't rhyme and it gets the point across. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I wasn't mad. I was super stoked because now we're making progress. I don't care that it's not my words. It's the words that are supposed to be there.
It's still the message that
Exactly.
Right. Right. I hear you on that, and I think that's wonderful. That's a perfect example of how that creative synergy that we have with other people, like, gets us to whatever we're trying to do. But another interesting thing that brought up for me as you were saying that is I heard, I think it was literally yesterday actually, this perspective on Taylor Swift's music that I thought was really interesting.
Mhm.
And the perspective was a lot of people will kind of critique her and say like her songs themselves are kind of mediocre. They're not necessarily like elevated music, right? But the reason that she's so popular is because she's so willing to let people into the details of her personal life with her
Yeah,
lyrics. So
that's a good
she's
point.
willing to kind of, yeah, she's willing to like give in a certain way with the words that she uses for her songs that a lot of artists aren't willing to do. And I was like, huh, when you put it that way, I can understand it because I think it's
Yeah,
true. Like it's like that transparency of like kind of here's my heart and soul and here's all of the details about my weird personal whatevers. Here they
right.
are for you. And people hear that and they want that because all we want is that connection.
Yeah, and people are looking for that vulnerability, you know.
Mhm.
So another question I had for you, because you're a professional that has turned your creative ability into something that you can do professionally. How would you tell someone? So say there's that high school student out there that's, you know, experimenting with painting, music, whatever they are pursuing as their, kind of creative expression. How would you encourage them to build that into something that they could do professionally and use?
I like that question a lot. I think what comes to mind first for me is being open. And what I mean when I say that is that there are some paths that are more traditional, right? Obviously, like if you're a musician, what do you
Hmm.
want? You want to go to Juilliard, you
Yeah.
you want like so we have very prescribed ways of thinking about creative paths, ironically or not. So I would say first and foremost, just be open to the fact that even though it might not always feel comfortable, you can and will evolve along this path. If you have the determination to be a professional painter, if you have the determination to be a professional musician, I promise you that there is nothing that can stop you from getting there except for yourself. So all
That's
you
Yeah.
have
good.
to do, yeah, like maybe you won't be yo yo ma, but why would you want to when you can be yourself, right? So like
Right.
you just embrace the openness of like, okay, maybe it's not going to look like a traditional way. Maybe it's not going to look like someone else's way because haha, guess what? It's me, so it shouldn't look like someone else's way.
Yeah.
And being open to the adventure of that because truly as I said if you want it enough you can succeed. You can succeed
Yeah.
beyond even what you think is possible as a creative. I truly believe that. Only if, though, you are open to it not looking the way that you might think it's going to look. That's what
Mm.
I think.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I love, love, love you saying basically be yourself. Because, like, it's a simple concept. But I remember when my wife started singing on the worship team, it was within, it was 2 weeks before our friend Ariana was leaving to go do an internship. And somebody made, the passing comment of, oh, you got big shoes to fill, which was true because Ariana's a fantastic vocalist. And I like it even more because she was the one who turned around and looked at my wife and was like, just wear your own shoes. And I was like,
I
that's
like
it's
that.
just such a good point. Like,
Yeah.
don't try and be somebody else. Just be yourself because the best version of you is going to be better than you copying somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the shoes like metaphor. I think
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
it's a good one. It's a good one.
I,
And
It
to
was me
extend
who said it. I'm going to take the credit. It was
okay,
definitely me who
you get the
said it.
credit. You get the credit.
Yes,
That's
it
fine.
was me.
But to have a little fun creatively, let's extend the shoe metaphor, which is like the steps that you take on that path, right? Your footsteps don't look like anyone else's. Your shoes
yep.
are different to embrace
Mm.
that part of the metaphor, but your trajectory is different. Your
Hmm.
steps that you take the actual direction that you go. It's not going to be anyone else's path. It's not going to be anyone else's path. And the more that you think that your path needs to look like X or Y, the more you're actually creatively confining yourself instead of expanding into your creativity. As a musician who wants to be a professional musician, you need to expand into your creativity. You don't need to confine your creativity, but that's what we
Right.
do. That's what we do. We think it needs to look like this. I have to hit this milestone. Oh, I'm a failure because I didn't play this, like stage. But that's not the truth.
Yeah.
You're just open to letting it unfold. That is the most creative thing you can do to support yourself in this process.
That actually makes me think of something. Our our music, the episode we recorded with Ronnie hasn't been released yet, has it? As of today, while we're recording this.
Yes, it came out 2 days
Okay.
ago.
Oh, that's right. So our last episode was with a friend of ours. It was actually on uh, worship and musicianship and stuff like that. He's another phenomenal musician and producer, actually.
Cool.
Um, but one of the things he was saying, hold on, I completely derailed my own train of thought.
Was
Picked
it
something
about
up
like
now.
a path? Was it about like finding your own path, like confinement, um, feeling it has to look a certain way? Um,
He just wanted to plug our last episode, really.
I didn't. I had a
So
good point,
vain.
and I can't remember. I somehow just. Oh, I got it.
You're welcome.
So no, he was talking about, because I was asking him like, what would you tell like a young aspiring musician coming up, and he was like, don't worry about the. His point was, don't worry about the gear and yada yada, and he brought up John Mayer, and he was like, you see
Yeah.
John Mayer at a concert, and he's got a pedal board that's got you know dozens of different pedals on it, and it sounds like John Mayer. And then John Mayer will also play a coffee shop with a pedal board that's got three pedals on it, and surprise, surprise, it still sounds like John Mayer. And I think my point was, it doesn't matter. Like, don't be confined, be yourself, because John Mayer, regardless of whether he's on that big stage or whether he's playing a small coffee shop or pub, which he still does, like, you're still yourself and still being your own. You're still expressing your own creativity, and the stage doesn't define it. You know, like
Right.
you're saying, the milestone of, oh, we want to hit this stage. Well, look at someone who would be considered a superstar, successful music artist, still plays small venues. Doesn't have to pack stadiums all the times, yet he still can do that. And I think that's one of the things too, is as a creative, we set goals or our idea of success as these certain things, but that doesn't necessarily need to define whether you're successful at whatever your creative expression is.
Right, right. And that's so important for so many reasons, but I think that I would suggest that the more that someone who wants to be creative and is pursuing a creative path, the more that they try to mimic someone else or step outside themselves authentically to look a certain way, the more they actually become distant from success. So that doesn't
Mm,
mean that they can't ever get back. That doesn't mean that they can't be successful. I don't mean any of that. And in fact, a lot of people who mimic others, they can be successful, but I feel like it's short lived. And I feel
yeah.
like it's never going to give you the fulfillment part of the success. So if you want
Mm,
ultimate success, if that means money for you, if that means fame, you want to be recognized, if that means impacting people, it can mean whatever you want, but you have
yeah.
to just understand that you need to figure out who you are at your core, and you need to let that be your vehicle. Because the more that you deviate on these different paths that aren't your path, the further you're getting from that success that's meant for you. The success is ready made for you. It's just a matter of you being open to the journey to get to that destination whenever you do.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
That is a really good point. You make a lot of really good points. Come back anytime.
Thank you.
So with that, what do you see as your future with these different, creative expressions? I know you're in the process of getting your book published. What do you see as kind of on the horizon for you for, you know, new creative outlets, creative expressions? What does that look like?
For me right now, my focus is speaking. So what I'm looking to do really is to be able to start to be on stage to share a lot of creative thinking like this in a way that really reaches people and makes them believe that they are uniquely creative, that they have something to offer, that they can and do whatever that looks like for them, whatever they want, whatever they're trying to achieve. If they feel stuck, if they don't feel stuck, whatever it is, they can do it. Basically, just being able to share with people how I think they are capable and they're worthy, and that I think life itself is the ultimate creative act. And
Mm-hmm.
anyone who has ever said I'm not creative, or like I can't do that, or I shouldn't do that, to be a sincere encouragement to them. So, I'm applying to a lot of stages right now.
Yeah,
TEDx is potentially on the horizon. So getting
that's
some
awesome.
momentum. Thank you. Getting some momentum in that direction. That is my current creative focus. Um, because there's so much tied up creatively in that for me. It's the ideas, all of the critical thinking that I get to do, all of
Mm-hmm.
the experimentation that I get to do, like on TikTok right now. Like I'm having a lot of fun with that. And it's just a way of me taking these ideas that I've always had and I've always been like marinating myself in, and it's just starting to put them out, like share them instead of keeping them inside of myself. Like I want them more to be an expression, not just of me, because that's not the important part. It's an
Yeah,
expression of life itself. That's what I want people to understand. It's not about me, it's about the ideas and how they really can be creative if they want to be.
that's super cool.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
And I mean, those prospects are awesome, and I mean, I really appreciate. I mean, we both really appreciate you coming and doing this with us. Like I said, this is a new step for us, and I had zero idea what to expect or how it was going to go or if it was going to go.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, whatever stage or platform you land on, I mean, there's not a doubt in my mind that you're going to impact people's lives and like
Thank you.
excel at it. Because I mean, even just speaking with you for what an hour and a half, I'm like, I already think a different way.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
I really appreciate hearing that. Thank you so much.
I
You're
mean,
welcome.
just thinking of how many times just in this podcast alone have we been like, wow, I never thought of that way. Wow, that gave me a new perspective. I do really appreciate you sharing these things, and I think that whatever stage you're on, you're going to make a difference and be able to impact people with that.
Thank you,
Because
Zach.
even this, I there's people that I know that I'm gonna be like, hey, I want you to listen to this episode.
Same.
I think you're gonna be able to get something from it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
that's
you.
awesome.
Thank
Other
you.
than the TikTok, yeah, TikTok. Those are tasty.
TikTok.
Other other than the TikTok account you shared with me, is there any other place where you want like people to go to learn more about you or just to, I don't know, enjoy the content you're putting out?
For just this exact moment, I'm just gonna say TikTok. In
Perfect.
the
Okay.
near future, no, there will be more, but people
Okay.
can reach me on TikTok regardless, so I'll just say that as like the main way to focus in right now.
Awesome.
Awesome. We'll put that link in our bio and all our posts and everything,
Yeah.
so people will be able to click on it and be connected to your TikTok.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then, like I said before, just thank you so much again for doing this. I had fun. I hope you had
Oh,
fun.
I had fun.
I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you both for being um so fun to talk to and just like really open, and like we vibed it. We just like let it go
Hmm.
wherever it wanted to go. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
got it.
of course.
And thank you all for listening and enjoying this first of many, I mean, remote podcast episodes.
Yay.
Um, yeah, now we have this capability. You're going to see a lot more in the future. We have like 10 more already scheduled, which is wild. So thank you guys so much for your support and, keep sharing it with people. I mean, the last thing I'll share with all the listeners is the Seeing Through the Darkness episode is still, it's our most listened to episode. We broke 180 today. And that's a big deal, not just for us, but for our friend Lori with that book. Like, she's seen growth and upticks in her social medias and stuff. So thank you guys for that.
And that's also over, what, 4 countries and 72 cities?
So yeah, 72 cities. I was like, oh,
Congratulations.
that's a lot of cities. But yeah, thank you guys for the support, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.